Hi, I'm Mike. I make videos and tell stories.
I'm Tony. I'm a flavor chemist. I make things smell and hopefully taste good. Welcome to the first episode of What's That Smell? Cheers.
Cheers.
We were vacationing in Scotland, and there's botanical gardens in the middle of the city, and they were growing all these ingredients used in gin. And then I found out they were making gin in the garden. And I learned that they couldn't grow all the plants to make gin, so they began to substitute. And that made me realize, well, why can't I do the same thing? I'm a flavor chemist. I like all these herbs. I have a garden, and that's what led to me having what I call my garden gin. My name is Tony Moore, and I'm a flavorist and a flavor chemist. My garden is at my home in Cincinnati, Ohio, and my laboratory is in my garden. A lot of the things that are in gin are things that we use as flavor chemists, but they're also things that we just see in our life, things we smell in our life. Cooking, florals, even pine trees. So for me, gin represents a lot of things in one glass, like almost kind of like life in a glass. In my garden, I grow lots of things that I can use in gin. I didn't mean for that to happen. I just began growing things that smelled or were interesting to me. I started to realize, well, all these things could actually go in the gin. You take this solid thing, these flowers, these plants, and you put them in water and you cook them just like you're making tea or making soup, and then you distill them, which sounds complex, but it's not complicated at all. You literally then capture the essence of all these flowers into another liquid. So it's like magic to me, or alchemy. So the most common gin is London dry gin. Juniper is the most common ingredient. Gin has to have juniper. It's seemingly a simple smell. It's piney, it's fresh, balsamic, woody, but it's, as with everything in nature, pretty complex. Terpenes are the largest chemicals in gin. Pinene is one of the most common terpenes in gin. But then there's other complex terpenes like menthodionol, which gets more like minty, but musty. Even within the one ingredient, juniper, you've got all these different chemicals that make it complex. And different junipers might also taste different. Outside of juniper, citrus is probably the most recognizable component in gin. Lemon, lime, orange, grapefruit. So when I make my garden gin, I end up using everything. I'll use the entire fruit, and I'll press the juice. I'll put the juice in with the liquid, and then I'll put the entire thing, everything back into the gin basket. So I think that provides a very fresh flavor. If you look at the chemistry between London dry gin and my garden gin, you'll see those components. So you'll see it has much more of the terpenes like limonene that's coming from the peels. It also has more aldehydes. Orange is going to have aldehydes like decanal. Lemon's going to have aldehydes like citral. And if you look at grapefruit, there's other ketones like nootkatone, which make it characteristic grapefruit.
The use of angelica and orris roots are both intended as fixatives, to bind the different aromas and flavors together. Whether they actually do this or not is apparently an ongoing debate. Nevertheless, Tony finds that these ingredients add their own flavors. Angelica contributes woody, earthy, and musky notes from terpenes like philandrine and sabinine, and orris brings perfume, violet, berry, and woody notes from ketones like irones, ionones, and damascenone.
Coriander is another one of the more common ingredients in gin. And that's kind of spicy, but it's floral, citrusy, and there's even kind of a nutty note to coriander. So that's a pretty complex ingredient. When you look at the chemistry, linalool, nigryl acetate, gamma-terpenine, alpha-pinene, those are two pinenes, so that's the commonality. And I think that's why some of these ingredients blend well in gin.
Tony cut a bunch of fresh herbs from his garden for this gin, so I got to experience what each one contributed to the final product. The lavender flowers add the alcohols linalool, lavandolol, and geraniol. From the hyssop, you get minty-smelling chemicals like cineol, pinocamphone, and camphor. And the holy basil adds the spicy-smelling chemicals estragol and eugenol. I'd tasted lavender in gin before, but not hyssop and holy basil. Made for a great beverage, no doubt.
Modern gins have roots in original gin. So you'll see some of the common ingredients in more modern gins: juniper, coriander, angelica, orris, citrus. But modern gins are also using ingredients that are foraged or found locally wherever the gin's made. That's another inspirational thing. There are some gins that have hops, but I think it should be a regular ingredient. It's so complex, it's fresh, it's bright, but it can also be earthy, and I think it blends very well with all the florals. It also blends well with other herbal notes. And the chemistry of hops is also unique. It's complex. You've got myrcene that you also find in juniper and other citrus plants, but then you've got humulines, which makes hops have a lasting flavor.
Hey, this is Mike. While I finish assembling this gin episode, Tony is attending a flavor chemistry conference in the Netherlands, where in the 16th century, a Dutch chemist distilled malted mashed grains with juniper berries and invented Jenever, the Dutch word for juniper. The British later substituted neutral grain spirits. They called it gin, and so it remained for roughly 400 years. But in the past decade or so, gin has changed a lot with the introduction of new Western recipes like Tony's Garden Gin that rely less on juniper and include all sorts of herbs and flowers and other stuff. So this begs the question, what's next for gin? What else might wind up in the botanical basket? And for that matter, will it even be called gin? Next on What's That Smell? As the United States braces itself for an upcoming election, perhaps the time is ripe to re-examine what makes this country great. July 4th, grilled hot dogs, sparklers, bottle rockets, and beer. Join us as What's That Smell celebrates an aromatic democracy.